Hey, good morning. Woo-hoo. All right. Hey, if you're watching online, we're glad that you're a part of this service. We invite you to come and be a part of this group sometime. But if you grew up in the 80s, you are familiar with the A-Team. Anybody seen the A-Team? Maybe reruns, right? Are they Nick at Night? If it wasn't for Nick at Night, right? But the A-Team. You know the story of the A-Team. Some of you are like, I have no idea. There are four or five guys. I think it's five actually. Anyway, this team of this group of people who were arrested, falsely accused, all that said they were Vietnam vets, and then they escaped from military prison, and they were doing all this good stuff. You know, one main character in the A-Team was Hannibal. Remember Hannibal? He's the older guy, kind of the ringleader of the group, and he had this saying at the end of every show. He would always say, "I love it when a..." There we go. I love it when a plan comes together. And so there's another show about that same time that we watched as kids, and that was MacGyver. Anybody watch MacGyver? And how many of you learned how to fix everything by watching MacGyver, right? It was, A-Team and MacGyver, it didn't matter what circumstance they found themselves in. I remember one episode of the A-Team, they were like pinned up in this cave, and there just happened to be a welder and steel and all that, they were able to build this armor for their van, and it was just like, really? And then MacGyver, every show, it didn't matter. If he had duct tape, tinfoil, and some bobby pins, the dude he just fixed it all, saved everything, and just the plan seemed to always come together for these guys, right? Well, what happens when your plan doesn't come together? Don't you hate it? Don't you hate it when your plan doesn't happen the way that you thought it would, that your plan doesn't come together, right? That's the world that we live in. No matter how well we plan, no matter how well we lay out our schedule and get everything lined up, it just seems to not work, right? It just seems that something goes wrong. Vacations, fun days, whatever. This past week, Robin we like to plan, and she was putting some plans together, and she was making it happen, and we're going to get together as a family. And as your kids start getting a little older, they're scattered all over the place, and then we've got relatives we want to get with, and so she's working it, man. She's like, okay, we're going to be here, and we're going to go to the lake, and we're going to do this, and so I'm just the do boy. I'm just like, just you get this, okay, I'm getting it all, and then it decided to almost snow this week, right? It's like, where the heck that come from? It's like it's 60 degrees during the day, and so all of a sudden the plans kind of got scrapped, and like, wow, we can't do that. And then one of them gets sick, my son and his wife get sick, and they're not there, and things just don't happen. And sometimes that's our lives, right? We plan and we strategize. Any planners in the house? Couple of you, yes, yeah. There's one person here this morning that totally amazes me in her ability to plan. That's Shelly Black. She's running the sound this morning. She's mixing it up for us today. But she is a master planner, and they did a trip to Disney World a few years ago, and I just remember her sharing her plan and her schedule, and it's like, oh my goodness. I hope it worked out for her. I didn't check with her after the first service, but my guess is everything didn't work out exactly the way that she had planned, even though it was well planned out. And sometimes that's our case, right? The things that we work so hard at planning, it just doesn't work out the way that we think it would. And because people get sick, the kids get tired, the weather doesn't cooperate, right? Now listen, ladies, next week is Mother's Day. We already know that, right? I had a conversation with my mom a few years ago, and I said, Mom, you excited about Mother's Day? She says, no. It's kind of like another day of the year. I'm like, really? Are we that bad as kids? She said, when you guys were younger, I used to get my hopes up so much, and I was always disappointed. Any disappointed moms here this morning? It's true. It's true. And I'll just tell you, from the dad's side of things, my kids are getting a little older, so the threats are a little different. But when they were little, I won't tell you what I told them, but go to jail for that. But you are going to behave today. And they never did. You want to rip their arms off and beat them with them, but, they just didn't do it. And so moms, I hope your kids are just obedient, but they're probably not going to be. Dad, you might threaten to rip their arm off and beat them with it, but they're still going to, so sometimes our plans don't work out the way that we think that they will. So what we tend to do is we tend to just not make any plans, right? We tend to just give up, just lower the expectation. Well, that's not the solution either. When we go on missions trips, every time we have a well laid out plan. I mean, we have a schedule, because those of you who are you're kind of a real organized person, and you like everything, all the beans lined up and all that stuff. We know who you are. You can't survive without a schedule. So we got to give you a schedule up front and say, this is what we're going to do. But every missions trip, I've never been on a missions trip where it worked out that way. Never. Nothing ever goes planned or as planned. We went to Honduras in February this year, and we had a great plan, right, Vic? Great plan. And nothing happened the way we planned it. We were supposed to pick up this pallet of stuff, school supplies from the customs as we left the airport. Well, they decided, we're not giving you your stuff. And so we had to make a trip back the next day and then stay all day. It was just nothing happened the way that we planned it. But listen, it was probably the best trip we've ever had. I'm like, wow, how'd that happen? Oh, I wonder. But sometimes we get so frustrated, right? Because we can't control all the variables in our lives. There's so many things that are just really out of our control. And we go through life many times frustrated and disappointed because this is not what I had planned. I didn't plan to be a single mom. I didn't plan to lose my job. I didn't plan to get sick. I didn't plan this stuff. I didn't expect that the first few years of marriage would be this difficult. I wanted to be a lawyer. I wanted to be a doctor. I wanted to be a pilot. I didn't want to be doing what I'm doing right now. I had dreams. I had plans. She's sick all the time. He's gone all the time. The baby cries all the time. And we go through life frustrated and disappointed. I know I'm talking to you this morning because I've been there myself. If you're not there today, you might be there next week. But we go through life and we're just frustrated because why can't anything go the way that I plan, right? Why doesn't it work out? And sometimes things start to happen and things start to pile up in our life. And as we look back and we say, this is so far from what I had planned for my life. We wonder, does our life really matter? Does my life really matter? I know we watched It's a Wonderful Life, and if you weren't here, everything would change. We get all that, but does my life really matter? Because sometimes we just wonder, and we go through life, and we feel like, I feel like I'm invisible. Because the things that I plan to do just aren't happening, and we feel lost. We feel lost. And we get frustrated. We get disappointed. See, we get frustrated and we get disappointed when our plans fall apart because we forget that we really don't have control over everyone and everything. We don't control all the variables, but yet we still set out with a plan. Proverbs 16:9 says this. It's a great verse of Scripture. If you're into memorizing Scriptures, this is a great one to memorize. Write it down. It says, we can make our plans, but the Lord determines our steps. We can make our plans, but the Lord determines our steps. Listen, I want to share something with you this morning that I think if you'll grasp, if you'll listen to it and you'll let it just sink into your heart, not up here. I mean, we're so much on just thinking we know everything, but let it sink into our hearts. I believe it'll transform you because I think there are people here this morning that are frustrated with your life. As you look at your spouse at night while he's snoring away, you're thinking, really? This is not what I had planned. As you see your kids running amok, you're like, this is really not what I had planned. And you go to work on Monday and you deal with the imbeciles that you have to deal with, right? I use that tongue in cheek. Maybe you're their imbecile. I don't know. We get frustrated and we're like, this isn't what I had planned for my life. If you let what I'm about to say to you this morning just sink into your heart, I think it'll change everything. See, we are searching for purpose. We're on a quest for purpose. When you ask people, what's your purpose? I mean, that's a big question that people really want to know. Why am I here? What is the purpose of my life? You have purpose, and I have purpose because God has a plan. Say it with me. I have purpose because God has a plan. See, God has a plan for this world, for everyone in it, for everything in it, for you specifically. We know, oh yeah, God has this big plan, but how do I fit in? You fit in very perfectly into His plan. You have purpose. And your purpose is because God has a plan. See, you're never going to find your purpose in and of yourself. This is the key. You're never going to find your purpose in and of yourself. But yet we try. We try. Welcome to the book of Esther, the story of Esther. We're in this new series, and we are going through the book of Esther, talking about purpose this morning. And I don't know if you've ever read the book of Esther. It's been actually a while since I've read the book of Esther. It's not one of those books that you go to for encouragement every day, like a psalm or a proverb. But and so it's been a few years. And so when I knew, okay, I'm going to be doing a series on that, I decided to read through it. It's not a hard read. It's 10 chapters. That sounds like a lot, but they're short. There's no pictures, guys. But anyway, you can read through it really fast. And so I really encourage you to read through it. But I want to tell the story real fast. If I can just give you the highlights. If you're like me and you'd rather watch the movie, there's a movie called A Night with the King. Okay, it's not totally accurate, but it's close. It's kind of romanticized. There's another one on Netflix, I think, and it's titled Esther, so you can watch that. Or you can just pick up your Bible and read it. It's really easy to do that. All right, and you'll get the whole real story. But I want to just highlight some things and help you to understand where we're going in this series. Because the story really starts about 125 years earlier when the children of Israel the Jewish people are taken into captivity. First the Assyrians, then the Babylonians, and then the Persians. And so the story of Esther is set in the time frame of the Persian Empire. And Esther is alive and living in what's called Susa. It's this area, region that the Persians have conquered. It's a huge empire. And so chapter 1 of Esther starts with King Xerxes. He's the king of Persia. He's having this party, this banquet. If you read through the book of Esther, they have a lot of banquets. There's a lot of partying going. They're my kind of people. But anyway, they're having this party. And so Xerxes wants to show off his trophy wife to all of his friends. This is my interpretation. It doesn't say it exactly like that, but that's basically what happened. And so Vashti, the queen, basically says, "Nah, I'm not up for that tonight. I don't want to be on display." And so she says, "I'm not coming to the banquet." Well, it really put Xerxes in kind of a bad place, right? Sometimes our wives do that, right, guys? When they kind of put us in our place. You ever had that happen to you? It's like, "Oop," and you walk away. Well, Xerxes wasn't doing that. He's like, "I got to put my foot down. I got to show everybody that I'm the head of this house." And he actually did it, and he put her out to pasture. He basically said, "You're no longer the queen." I don't know if he took the head off or what, but she was no longer queen. Well, now there's no queen, and so people are saying, "Hey, you need a queen." So they round up all the virgins, and they get them all together, and they spend a whole year in beauty treatments. Read it. It's amazing. I mean, talk about a pretty cool deal, ladies. A year of beauty treatment. Nails, facials. I'm serious. And so during that time, something about Esther catches the eye of the head eunuch who's over the harem. And she has favor with him. And not that kind of favor, but you know what I'm saying. Because he's a eunuch. You get that, right? All right, we won't go there. But and so in the process of that, she gets special treatment and all. And then when it's her time to go in and spend a night with the king, and let's be real, because the movie kind of romanticizes and all. I mean, she was going to have sex with him. That was it, And he was kind of trying her out. And something about her caught his attention. Of all the women, and she gained favor with the king and became queen of Persia. Huge deal. See, because Esther is a Jew, she was raised by her cousin Mordecai. Her parents died. She was an orphan. And now all of a sudden, this orphan Jew, who was really despised by most of the Persians, and they didn't know she was a Jew. They didn't tell people. They were, kept that under the radar. Now all of a sudden, this orphan Jew is the queen of Persia. She didn't plan for that. It's not something, I'm sure she didn't sit around as a young girl dreaming about being in the castle, because I know it sounds great, a year of facials and all, but that job had to have been the worst. There's a whole lot of things that went along with it. But here she finds herself in this position. And now enters scene the evil villain Haman. Haman is a guy who despises the Jewish people and wants to wipe them off the face of the earth. And so he gets a decree from Xerxes to be able to do just that. And the Jews hear about it. And from the entire Persian Empire, Haman's plan, and he's been given approval now to wipe out the entire Jewish race of people. This is serious. And all of a sudden, Mordecai and all the Jews realize this and learn this. And Mordecai covers himself in ashes. He rips his clothes. He covers himself with sackcloth. He's in mourning. And he's like, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? I mean, a death sentence has been laid down. And this is an irrevocable law. It was the law of the Medes and the Persians that once it was stated, it was going to happen no matter what. And so they knew, we're toast. We're gone. And so he goes to Esther and says, did you know what's going on? And says, maybe for such a time as this, maybe this is why you were born. And Chuck's going to talk about that more next week. And so she calls a fast. And so people fast. And she decides, you know what, I've got to go in to talk to Xerxes. I've got to go into his presence. Well, you didn't just walk right in, even though, you're the queen. In the Persian Empire, if you came into the presence of the king and you were not invited and he didn't raise his scepter as you came in, your head was chopped off. And so she knew this could go one of two ways. And she could be going topless. No, I'm just kidding. But anyway. And so she fasted and she went in and he extended the scepter. And so then she invited the king and she invited Haman to a banquet. Now in the midst of this, something important happened. Mordecai thwarted a plan to kill, that the palace guards had started putting together to kill Xerxes. Xerxes actually ended up being killed as a king, but not then. And they thwarted this plan, and it was recorded in the Chronicles, but nothing was ever done for Mordecai, and so it went on and all. But anyway, so Haman and Xerxes get invited to this banquet, and then she invites them to another banquet, and they come, and then at that banquet she tells Xerxes what is going on, what Haman has planned. And when Xerxes leaves, Haman comes over and he's begging her and groveling. And when the king comes back in, this is Hollywood stuff. He thinks Haman's trying to get fresh with my wife. And so, off with the head. Haman gets killed. And in the process of that, Mordecai, the king reads the chronicle because he couldn't sleep, and discovers that, oh, hey, Mordecai did this for me and nothing was ever done for him. So he is then elevated in position, and so really cool story. And long story short, the Jews are saved. Cool story. There's a lot of details. Trust me, 10 chapters. A lot of details. But a cool story of how God reversed something. A cool story about how a group of people ended up in a situation, in a place that they didn't plan for. The Jews didn't plan to be in Persia. They didn't plan to be hated by somebody who had the power and the position to actually wipe them out. And they didn't plan for all that, but it's a really cool story of how even though they didn't plan for this stuff to happen in their life, God had a bigger plan. And his plan was to deliver them. And he did. Really cool story. And that's why we're talking about Esther. Here's something that's really interesting about the book of Esther. It's the only book in the Bible where God is not mentioned. It's the only book in the Bible. You can read through it and you can say, I'm going to prove him wrong. Go ahead, please do. Go read through all 10 chapters. God is never mentioned in the book of Esther. Never. And sometimes it might seem like God is absent from your life. Sometimes it might seem like he's absent from the narrative and the story of what's going on, the circumstance that you're in. It seemed like God was absent. If you're reading through the book of Esther and the story of Esther and you don't see his name, you don't hear about him, he's not talked about, but boy, don't be mistaken. As you read through it, you'll see, oh, God's there. Oh, he's there big time. Even though sometimes he seems absent. In your life, in my life, we have those times, don't we? You've walked through those times. You've walked through those seasons where you've wondered, God, where are you? And maybe you've said those exact words. God, where are you? Do you know what I'm going through? Do you know what's happening in my life? And I am sure that Mordecai and Esther and the Jewish people said, why? Why are we here? Why is this happening? God, do you really even care? And we see how God really did care. And he was very present. Very present. You know, maybe you're new to church. Maybe this is kind of a new thing for you. But as you look back at your life, you know, in the midst of it, you don't see it. Sometimes it's really hard to see God when you're in the midst of just doing your thing. But as you look back, you're like, wow. There was that time that I should have been dead. There was that time I should have been this or I should have been that. And man, something happened. Oh, maybe that was God, huh? Maybe that was God. I'm sure it was. And even when it seems like God is absent from your story, he's very much a part of what's going on. See, you and I have purpose. We have purpose because God has a plan. Your purpose is not derived from within yourself and who you are. See, the reason we struggle so much with disappointment and frustration when life doesn't turn out the way that we hoped and we planned is because our sense of purpose is so closely dependent upon our plans. And because of that, we get frustrated because it doesn't happen the way that I thought it would. The kids don't do what they're supposed to do. They're never going to do what they're supposed to do. No, I'm just kidding. You can beat them. But, you know, a spouse doesn't do what they're supposed to do. The weather doesn't cooperate. My boss doesn't cooperate. The car breaks down. And you know the story. Everything seems to happen. And so we tend to derive our purpose from our plan. And then we get frustrated. And then we wonder, man, does my life really matter? Does it really matter? Is life really worth living? And we struggle with that and we question if life is even worth living. See, when our present reality doesn't look like our dreams and our plans, we start to question our purpose. We wonder, what is my purpose? What is my purpose? We struggle with it. And that's why when you lose your job, you're like, what am I going to do? Who am I? I'm no longer drill sergeant. I'm no longer this. I'm no longer manager. I'm no longer boss. I'm no whatever, you know. And when the kids act up, I'm a bad mom. I'm a bad dad. And we struggle because it's so tightly wrapped up in our plans. Let me tell you something. Your purpose is not dependent on those things. Your purpose is determined by God's plan. And his plan is huge. It's enormous. we can't even grasp his plan. We can't understand how God can start moving and working and laying out things hundreds of years prior, and he puts this thing together, and we just happen to be a really cool part of his story. And sometimes it's so hard for us to see it and to see our part and our purpose in God's story. Because honestly, a lot of times we're so wrapped up in our own selves, right? And we walk around frustrated because, oh, why isn't that happening? I was 17 years old when I was in a service, and I just started following Jesus. And me and God had this wrestling match going on. From the very beginning of the service, God was saying to me, not audibly, but in my heart, I knew. I mean, it was just such a inner turmoil. God was saying, I want your plans. I'm like, ugh. I mean, how much plans does a 17-year-old have? My one plan was get out of school. Hated school. I just wanted to get out of school. And I had a cute girlfriend. So I had plans. And God said, end up marrying her too, so I have a cute wife. Ding! No. But how many plans can you have at 17? But I tell you what, I had plans and I didn't want to give them up. And finally, I said, okay, Lord, I'll give you my plans. I had no idea that God had such a huge plan, such an incredible plan for my life. I don't know exactly what it is. I don't know. I can't say, well, I know, I'm going to be here and do that, but it has been such an amazing journey. But I tell you what, though, it hasn't always been comfortable. There's been a lot of painful times in my journey, a lot of painful experiences. We're walking through one of those right now. We're walking through a season for the last year when my mother-in-law was diagnosed with brain cancer, and it changed our world, and it's changed her world. It's changed my father-in-law's world. We didn't plan for that. My wife didn't plan for her mom to go through this stuff. We didn't plan for it. But I tell you what, and I'm not just saying this because I'm the pastor and I'm supposed to put on a smile. I'm not doing it because of that. I'm telling you the honest truth. I've never felt like I've ever been more in the center of God's will than at this stage of my life. But I tell you what, I look around, I feel like I'm in the movie Twister, and cows are flying by, and cars. I'm like, oh, But I know God is in control. I know He's in control. Why do I know that? Because He's been so faithful through the years. I've trusted Him, and He's been so faithful. It's not I'm grabbing for hope. I've seen Him. I've seen Him do it. Does that take away the pain and the pressure? It makes it bearable. It really does. It makes it bearable because I know that God is in control. See, we have purpose because God has a plan, and His plan is much bigger than you and I can ever imagine. Jeremiah 29:11 says, "For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord. Plans to prosper you and not to harm you. Plans to give you a hope and a future." This is what God's plan is for you and I. That's His plan. I don't know about you, but I would rather trade my plan as little. Now, I thought it was pretty big at 17, but I'd rather trade my plan in for a plan like that. A plan that I'm a part of something, that my life has purpose. And no matter what goes on in my life, I can trust Him that He's working His purpose. So your purpose doesn't come from your looks. People might recognize that. Might get you somewhere in life, but that's not your purpose. Because what happens when you lose them? What happens when you have a car accident and a scar across your face or your body? What happens if all of a sudden what you were doing you can't do anymore? It's not about your position. Because what happens when the boss says, we don't need you anymore? We don't need you. We don't need your position anymore. It doesn't matter what your last name is. It doesn't matter what kind of talent you have. I don't know how many of you follow baseball, and if you're real baseball buffs, you might remember Dave Dravecky, who is a pitcher. He was a left-handed pitcher for the San Francisco Giants. And in the 80s, he was one of the best, and And while pitching for one of the games where they were actually headed to the World Series, they discovered that he had a tumor in his shoulder. And they had to remove it, did surgery, all that stuff, and he went through recovery. And actually, this was prior to that series that he was pitching in. But in that one game, you can YouTube it. It's a little bit gross, but he's pitching, and when he throws that pitch, his shoulder breaks, and his career was over. He was done. A guy who was known for, left-handed pitchers are not a dime a dozen, and so he was a good one. And so a guy who really built his life on what he did. And when they, interviewed him, it was Dave Brubeck, the left-handed pitcher for the San Francisco Giants. And that was his identity. At least people thought that's what his identity was. And that's what his purpose was. But when all that happened, I remember watching an interview and people said, Dave, what are you going to do? What's going to happen? And he started questioning, who am I now? Who am I? And the thought immediately came to him because of a bedrock faith that he had in Christ. He said, you know what? First and foremost, I'm a child of God. I'm a child of God. Who I am is not determined by what I do. And he was good. He was good at it. Most of us, if we're at the top of the ladder, in a sense, in what we're doing, and all of a sudden that ladder gets kicked out from under us, we go into deep depression. We don't know what to do in life because what am I going to do? Who am I? And we struggle. And he had this bedrock faith and understanding that I'm a child of God. And I don't know what God's plan is. I don't know what's going to happen. But I know He's in control. I know He has a plan. Years have gone by, of course. But Dave has been more effective as a speaker than ever as a pitcher. That stuff comes and goes. Sometimes we may find ourselves in a place and we wonder, why am I here? I'm sure Esther, when they were rounding everybody up and they're like taking her away from her family and she's with people that she doesn't, like, why? What's going on? What's happening? When Mordecai gets the word that, every Jew is about to be wiped off the face of the earth, I'm sure they wondered, why? What is going on? God, where are you in the midst of this? And maybe you've been in situations where you just felt like, God, I don't know where you're at. I don't know if you're even here in the midst of what's going on in my life. But I tell you, He is. He is. See, we derive our purpose from God because He has a plan. Every object, every tool, every part of an engine has purpose because of the Creator designed that for a purpose, right? You and I have purpose because of our Creator. We need to lift our eyes up and we need to see that there's a bigger plan than ours. It doesn't mean you don't make plans. It doesn't mean that you don't have dreams. It's just that we don't walk around frustrated and disappointed all the time and pointing fingers and if they would have done this, just trust God, you're in control of my life. You have a plan for my life. Jeremiah 29:11 all of a sudden becomes your favorite verse, right? God, you have a plan for me and I'm going to trust it. I want to show you a video in just a second. This happened during the first service. We didn't plan it, schedule it, but this happened. Somebody was in our first service. Let's go ahead and watch that video.
My name is Melinda. I'm Megan's mom. And I've been going through some struggles for quite some time. And believe me, I've always had faith, and I've been blessed many times by God. Well, last September, my husband walked out on me. After 20-some years. It's been really hard. So for the last 8 months, I've done everything I could. Tried, talk, communicate. To work things out. To keep marriage together. Went through a lot of financial problems this time. Still struggling. But last night I was going to take my life. I couldn't deal with it anymore. I fell to my knees, I prayed, and I asked God, why did He forsake me? And I told Him that I was coming to His house this morning. I haven't been in a while because of all the depression. And I said, I'm coming to your house in the morning and I need you to talk to me. And to Randy's sermon this morning, he was shouting at me. That he did not forsake me. And He had a plan for me. And that no matter how things are wrong in your life, so everything you heard this morning from Randy is a testament of God talking to you today. To not give up. And even with that song just now, this is my story. And I want to help you to know that God's talking today. He is shouting loud and clear. So listen. And He'll talk to you. And that's all I got to say. The struggle's not over. So please pray for me. So I can see it through. But today was a big testimony for me to say God's talking to me. And thank you, Randy. Thank you.
You know, amen. I'll tell you what, kind of gives you a glimpse of how big God is and how much He's in control. I didn't just think of the sermon last night. This sermon's been prepared about 9 months ago. It's really when the process started. God said, I want you to preach on Esther. Who would have known, huh? God's in control, and that's why we have purpose. He has a plan. Let's embrace His plan. Let our plans be absorbed into His. Amen? Amen. Would you stand with me? I don't know what you're going through, but I do know God knows, obviously. He's very well aware of it. He has a plan for your life. Let's embrace His plan. Would you bow your heads with me for a moment and just close your eyes? And maybe you're here and you're not in a relationship with God, but you'd like to be. He wants you to be. It's His plan for you to be in relationship with Him. You were never designed to live outside of that relationship. You were never designed to just do your own thing and your own plans, because His plan is so much bigger. And He controls everything. And so you're here this morning and you say, Pastor Randy, I want to follow Jesus. I want to give Him my heart. I want to pray for you. And if you'll let me, I'd like to pray with you. Father, I thank You for stirring our hearts and for drawing us. And thank You for the invitation to come and follow You. And Lord, even in those times where maybe we didn't see You in our story, but we understand You were definitely there. You were definitely involved, and You are here right now. And You want to be the main character in the story of our lives. You want us to be a part of Your story. I pray that You'll just give faith and courage. If that's you and you say, you know what, I'd like to pray that prayer, would you slip up your hand? I'm not going to ask you to do anything else. I want to pray for you. Anyone else? I just want to lead you in a prayer. Slip your hand up so we can pray together. Let's pray together. Say, Jesus, come into my life. I want to follow You. I trust You. Say, I have purpose because You have a plan. And I trust Your plan. And I give You my heart and my life. In Jesus' name, amen.
thrown in the Father's love, destined to die, poured out for all mankind. God's only Son, perfect and spotless one. He never sinned, suffered as if he did. All authority, every victory is yours. All authority, every victory is yours. Come on, let's lift him up in this place this morning.